We'll go on live from Zoom to YouTube. I'll tell you when it's live. Okay. All righty. Okay, ladies, we are going to go ahead and get started. Ladies, y'all ready? Yeah, I can't hear y'all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So, tonight we are talking about the LPC. This is for counseling graduate students. So if you are not a counseling graduate student, this is definitely not the live that you want to catch tonight. This is for anyone who is in a counseling graduate program or who just recently graduated or who will be graduating soon. We're talking about the process from graduation to becoming an LPC associate. So that's what we're going to get into tonight. I am Dr. Tanisha. I'm a licensed professional counseling supervisor, and I've been in the counseling field. Oh, at the end of this year, it'll be 25 years. And I've been supervising LPC associates, which used to be called LPC interns, for the last 18 years. And so tonight, I'm going to have on the panel with me current LPC associates who are going to talk about their experience, their journey from graduation to starting the process to counting hours. So again, this is for anyone who is currently a counseling graduate student who's interested in getting into the counseling profession or who has recently graduated. So I'm going to have the associates, the LPCs who hold their license, to go ahead and introduce themselves. So ladies, come on off of mute.
Hello. My name is Hanika. I go by Tan. So I am recently a newly licensed professional counselor associate. I graduated from Texas A&M, of course, with my degree. So I'm here locally in Texas. I work in an inpatient hospital with adults. It is amazing. I love it. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Jazz Burgess, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor associate here in Texas. Currently, I'm working at a group practice, and I'm also running my own private practice. I got my degree from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I'll be done with my hours in January. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jazz.
Hello, my name is Sarah Massey, and I'm an LPC associate in Texas as well. I am currently working in a PHP IOP program. I am about 2 years into my licensure, and I will be done by the end of the year. 600 hours left. I did get my degree from Texas Women's University, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm Kimiana Cuffy. I am also in Texas. I actually work in finance during the day, and in the evening, I have my own practice, which is Renew 2.0 Counseling. It's been a little slow starting up, and but I'm starting to see slowly but surely a lot of clients come through. I did receive my degree last year, July. And so I've been in the associate realm for about almost a year, but not quite there yet.
Thank you, Kim.
All right, I am Natasha Jones. I am a school counselor by day, and I am working on my LPC associate hours, mainly working at a nursing home, part-time on the weekends. So, and I am also here in the Dallas area.
Last but not least.
Hi, my name is Ara. I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor. I graduated in Oklahoma. I got my degree in rehabilitation counseling. Um, I am an LPC associate. I got my license back in 2021, but a lot of changes. So I am almost done with my hours. I think I have about maybe 1,000 left or so. So.
All right, ladies. Okay, so let's get into this. I think the person who is actually closest now is Sarah and Brianna had to jump off for a second. But you ladies are the closest to finishing your hours, so you know what the process is. You're almost to the finish line. But for everybody on here, you all started the journey the same way. You graduated from a clinical mental health counseling program or a counseling related program. You set for the NCE exam, and then it was time for you to prepare to get your LPC associate license. So that's what we're talking about tonight. What was that process like, and how can you help someone who's currently still in graduate school or just graduated maneuver through the process so that they can not make some of the potential mistakes that you guys made? So what would you say was maybe the biggest challenge that any of you faced in starting the process?
I would say for the process part, starting it wasn't a challenge because everything's kind of like self-explanatory. It was just more of like the exam and passing the exam, which was like my biggest issue. So for those who don't know, it took me 4 times to pass. Yeah, it took me 4 times. It wasn't that I didn't know the material. A lot of it is like dealing with test anxiety. So I have test anxiety. Then on top of dealing with test anxiety, life be lifing. So life happened for me in the process of trying to take my exam, as well as like I would miss it by like 1 or 2 points. So each time you take the exam, the score changes. So like 1 minute, the score is like a 95 to pass. The next time you take it, it may be an 87 to pass. The next time you take it, it may be like a 92 to pass. So you never know. It just all depends on the time frame you take it and then who's all in that class that took it. Because they always score the scores by the average. And then there's like 4 or 5 different versions of the test. So I would really say don't get discouraged when you fail, because I was failing by like 6 points, 2 points, 1 point type thing. Just try again. And what worked for me with the studying, because you can use the purple book, but when I actually read why it was that, I went and bought like the Hewitt's book. It's like HEWI something, that book, which I can share with people in like the chat. When I bought that particular book and actually read each chapter to why this flows the way it flows, then I was able to put the questions with the theory with the person to do process of elimination to pass the exam.
So, Tan, I'm glad that you opened it up with the NCE exam, because that is probably one of the biggest challenges for students. Because some students have been on your university, you can take the test before you graduate. If you are at a university where you can take the test before you graduate, I highly encourage you to do so. If you're not at a university where you can take the test, no worries, you'll take it right after you graduate. But you want to graduate and immediately start studying and take the exam. The longer you put off taking the exam, I think the more challenging it becomes. And because so many people do struggle with test anxiety, it makes it even more challenging. And this is a difficult test. This is not one of those tests you just go on a whim and say, I'm about to take the test tomorrow. This is definitely a test you need to spend at least probably about 2 to 3 months studying for. It's 200 questions, it's multiple choice, and you have 4 hours to take it. So it is an intense test. So Tan, thank you for at least opening up that process and saying, look, I ain't passed the first go round, but I kept going back and here I am with the license. Anybody else? What was your experience like?
Also add, I was one of the people who took it while I was still in school. So I probably spent way too long studying for the test. You also don't want to overstudy. And I probably took like 5 months to study just because I felt like I needed to do that. But one thing that I really think is important, if you do take it while you are still in school, make sure you request that your scores get sent to the board. If you take it after you graduate, they automatically get sent. But if you take it while you're in school, you have to request it. And I didn't know that. So I was waiting forever, thinking that I was just waiting for the scores, but they hadn't ever been sent. So make sure you request it.
Good point. Others, what challenges did you have that potentially you didn't even think about, didn't know it until you ran across it?
I think even knowing what you want to do, whether or not you want to start your own practice, whether or not you want to go do PRN, whether you want to work at, a, a group practice, whatever those things are, really evaluate what those different things look like and make sure that you understand the nuances behind them because I think a lot of people will be like, well, I'm going to go start my own practice. Well, there's a lot that goes into that when you do it, even just thinking about the business name, or paying the fee to get that set up and marketing and what type of EHR system you're going to use. You have to think about all those things that go into it.
Now, to speak to that, Kim, depending on what state you're in, because we are in Texas, and in Texas, as of January 1st, 2025, LPC Associates could start their own private practice. That is not the case in most states. And so if you are a counseling graduate and you want to start your private practice immediately after you graduate, you need to contact your state board because that is not the case in most states. If you're in Texas, you're lucky. You can definitely graduate, pass the exam, get a supervisor, and go right into private practice as Kim is describing.
I would also like to add, Kim specifically talked about knowing who you want to work with. On my end, I thought I knew who I wanted to work with until I actually worked with them. And so I will say when you are in graduate school, there is a certain experience that you do get. I did my internship at a private practice as well as a community-based therapy center at my school, and those were two very different experiences. I will say the private practice life is definitely very hands off. They don't really teach you too much other than how to use the system, how to bill, and things like that. So if you are going to step into that private practice life, just making sure that you're aware of how your license can be impacted based off of your documentation. Do you know what patients you should be working with or clients you should be working with? Do you know when to refer people out? And I think a lot of those things do come with experience. So one of my pitfalls, I would say, is private practice felt safe for me. And so I stuck with it as long as I could. However, private practice does have some pitfalls of you're not going to get a influx of clients as you would at an agency. It does take a minute to build a caseload. And even then, people fall off, people stop showing up. And one of the things is my goals was to finish my hours. And so stepping into the PHP IOP life was something I was like, absolutely not. However, in this time and now stepping into it later in my LPC associateship, I've realized it really trains you on documentation. It really trains you on learning the acuity of symptoms, the level of care. You start learning about medication because you get to work side by side with the psychiatrist. So just knowing that some of these things can seem daunting, but once you get into it, you might learn it, get comfortable with it, and you can always transition and shift. But if you start at a lower level of care, you do have a lot of learning as you work up with a higher level of cares as you get that experience as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Natasha R., did you guys want to share anything about your experience?
I would just like to share that, just kind of piggyback on what they've shared, using the time in my getting my hours to kind of try different areas out. My background has been in school counseling, so working with children. So now, as I'm getting my hours, I'm, doing more clinical, working with adults, and now even the elderly population. So just to kind of get experience in other areas outside of what I'm accustomed to.
Right. I feel like that's something that I wish I could have gone back and did while I was in getting my master's. I definitely would have, ventured out to do internships at different places, like a PhD program, group homes, and just like residential treatment centers, just to kind of figure out what my population was going to be going into the field. So.
So trying to figure out what you want to do once you graduate is a challenge in and of itself. But I think for some of you guys, finding a job wasn't as difficult as it was for others. And so what would you say to that? Jazz, I saw your head. What would you say to the counseling graduate who has now just graduated? They have their license and they're looking for a job as an LPC associate. What are some things that you learned firsthand that you didn't know before you started?
So I knew I wanted to go into private practice. I did my internship at a private practice. I enjoyed that experience. So I ended up starting my own private practice, Soul Haven Counseling. And although I was lucky to be able to carry some of my clients from my internship into my private practice, once you're out on private practice all by yourself, you have to find clients. Otherwise, there's no income coming in. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. And so even though I did have some clients, it just wasn't enough to sustain me in my lifestyle. So I started looking for jobs. It took a very long time for me to find a job. I think the job market is really hard right now, for one. But then also two, wanting to find the right fit. I think, and not to scare you, but I think I put out close to 100 applications. And there were different ones for group practice, private practice, for hospitals, just not getting the hits that I wanted, or that it just didn't align with where I wanted to go next. But it will come. It may take a while. And just like I think someone else was saying, exploring those other areas in which you might be able to get hours, like hospital. I never thought that I would work at a hospital, but I did apply for some hospital because I needed a job. And I finally did get a position and it ended up being great. But sometimes it is a little bit of a journey.
Thanks,
So I
Jazz.
would say for me, finding a job wasn't that hard actually. Mine actually came kind of easy in so many words. So it was like a job fair, I kind of went to it and I explained like, hey, like when I actually applied for the job, I was getting ready to take my exam. And so then I was like, well, I take my exam on like Monday. And then when I called her back and was like, so I failed it by like 3 points, like, 'cause you gotta be honest. And so she was like, okay, well, that's fine. We'll put you on like a contingent license. And then with a contingent license, you have so long to get your actual license. And then she just, whoever the director is or the whoever's licensed, they have to sign behind you, like review everything you do, kind of like what you would do an internship or practicum. So my transition was really kind of easy, more the less. So once I actually got in to the job, then I took the exam again and I passed it. And so I was able to like work freely and sign my own paperwork. I really didn't struggle as much. I do know that like not all places will hire you if you're not like fully licensed. That is a real thing, but there is a few that will. Um, I know it can be a great area for some people, but I mean, that's just what their contracts were and said. So my job like transition was really kind of easy. And then when I did get fully licensed, I got like a better job opportunity at like a different place that had like a little bit more experience than what I was getting at the recent one. So I'm gonna know I'm gonna get like all my hours because I'm inpatient. So I picked the hospital setting for a reason. I do want to go into the private practice sector. That is something I'm about to eventually tap into soon. But I did go the hospital route first to kind of get the experience I need and get like, how do I do this? How do I handle that? Learn about documentation. And then I'll kind of maybe part-time-ish private practice kind of thing. So yeah.
I'm glad you introduced the psych RAM because oftentimes counselors exclude psychiatric hospitals. And I think it's because we don't think about seeing ourselves working with severe patients who have a mental illness, even though we're capable of doing it. It's just not the first place on our list. But if you are just graduating and you're looking for a position where you're guaranteed to get hours because they're going to work you like crazy, psychiatric hospitals are going to be by far the best place to go. If you have an IOP or a PHP in your area, IOP is intensive outpatient, PHP is partial hospitalization, or if you have an inpatient psych facility, those places are always going to be hiring because they have a high turnover rate. They do work you like you insane. They will give you plenty of hours and you will want to quit every day. But you will knock those hours out in 18 months. So for those of you who weren't thinking about it, that's a great plan. Hey, cuz that's a great spot to get your hours done.
It
Yeah.
is.
That's
And
why I
you
would
will want to
say
quit.
you will want to quit. That's why I would say my pitfall was I think people make PHP, IOP, psychiatric hospitals, they're just like, it's just the scariest thing. One, they do train you very well. I can say at least at mine, I am trained very well because the liability is a lot higher at those places. So you will know how to document in a way where insurance can review it and continue to pay for cover your clients' services. You will learn how to do safety things, how to restrain people, how to protect yourselves, how to follow. So you will know, you will be a thorough clinician. I will say that. That's one of the things. And then Tan also pointed out something about being vocal. I would say that's probably the biggest thing for me is use your networks, that it is kind of rough out here applying for these jobs because there's a lot of associates out here and they're all putting in these applications, and sometimes they're ghost jobs, sometimes they just don't get back to you for a long time. But use those networks and really use LinkedIn. Contact recruiters, get in touch with people, get in front of people's faces, work your own networks, talk to people that you know, saying like, hey, I need a job, do you know anything that fits this criteria? I have a little rundown that I gave to my mom, and she just put it on Facebook, on her Facebook, and people would reach out and say, hey, I have this position for her, or she could apply to this. So just recognizing that sometimes your networks can be really helpful to you getting a job, but also focusing on what is your goal. If you have time to get your hours, if you believe like you're not trying to do this quick, you're just trying to do this on the side, great. If you're trying to get those hours quick, fast, and done, I will say that higher level of care will always lead you the right way.
You. Hey, Brianna. I just asked the question because you're almost done with your hours. So what was probably the most challenging piece of becoming an LPC associate for you?
Oh, I would say the job process would be the hardest part for me. It was finding the right job, and having the right guidance too. A lot of the jobs where I first got out there, they didn't have a lot of support for me. Also, not necessarily knowing what to expect from a job. So like that associates can't take insurance, or like weekend, or like just what that looks like in real time. So there were a couple of mistakes along the way for me that hindered how fast I was able to get my hours. So I would kind of just piggyback off what Sarah has already said, like making sure you be careful about and do your due diligence with these job hunts. Ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions. That's the best advice I can give when it comes to the job hunt. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Did I miss anybody? Any challenges? Okay. So one of the things that I think graduate students struggle with in coming out is figuring out what's the steps, like what should you do first, right? They'll hear, someone said the paperwork is easy, but is the paperwork easy? Because there are some associates that I have had who didn't get started until maybe after a year or two after they graduated, just because of the steps. Like, what do I do first? What needs to happen? And so for some of you guys, you just recently went through that process, right? So in the state of Texas, you all had to take your fingerprints, correct? I think everybody in here had to do the fingerprints.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we did.
Now that is something that's fairly new, right? Depending on how long you've had your license, we didn't always require that in Texas, but now we do require fingerprinting. So that's
Mhm.
something to keep in mind. You do have to get your fingerprints. Now, this is for anyone who's thinking about going into the profession, because I often get asked this question during interviews. If you're thinking about going into the counseling profession, but you have a criminal background, you want to check into that board, your state board, to see if you can even get licensed with that, depending on what that criminal background is. If it's a felony, what type of felony it is, it may prevent you from actually being able to get your license. So you don't want to go through a 60 credit hour graduate program, which is around 4 years, sit for an exam, and then find out you can't get licensed in your state. So you really want to make sure that if you have any criminal history, that you check into that first, especially if you're in the state of Texas, because fingerprinting is required. You also have to
Mhm.
take what's called the jurisprudence exam. So that's a short exam that you're going to have to take every 2 years, every time you renew your license. It feels like a headache, but when it comes time to renewing your license, you really look forward to it because it's an update about information that you need to know about your license. So you need to do your jurisprudence, you need to do the your fingerprinting and have all of your paperwork. The other thing that I don't think a lot of graduates know before they go into this process is you all need your supervisor before you submit your paperwork to the board. You cannot submit your paperwork to the board without a approved supervisor on file. So for people, you got to start doing that search. So ladies, I want to start talking about what was the process like for finding a supervisor, because that's going to be a big challenge for some people. If you don't have a supervisor, you can't get your license and you can't start counting your hours. So what would you say to counseling grads who are starting the process? How should they start looking for a supervisor?
I
I
was
was,
Go ahead, Tan.
yeah, I would say, well, I went to like, I think it's like motiva.com, but I asked around. So like I asked other like colleagues or like people that was in my graduating class, like where did they go look? And so when I found out a place, I actually looked at each person's website and like I read their bio, and then I also had interviews with a few people, and I had like my own questions I wanted to ask. Because one thing, if you're gonna find a supervisor, you want someone that's going to blend with you, because that's very important. If you can't blend with your supervisor, you feel like y'all can't relate, you won't open up to them. And so it was very important for me to get, for one, I wanted a woman. I wanted a woman. If I couldn't get the one person I did want, because they were booked, but I was like, I'm getting a woman. And I wanted someone who was Black and she understood me. And she was able to give me that space. If I said something, I didn't want to be shunned for saying something. I was okay with being corrected, but I wanted to be able to be free to like really say how I feel. And so it was very important for me to find that person, interview that person, see if they can really help me be the best therapist I can be. I wanted someone to challenge me, take me out of my comfort zone, because I will get in my comfort zone, I'll stay there. So I wanted them to pull me and be like, no, I need you to do this. I need you to go this way. And that was very, very important for me when I was like finding that person that I could blend with, that can also challenge me in like a respectful way so that I can be my best authentic self. But even if I was to have a moment, they were able to let me have that moment without judgment.
Yeah. I would agree with Tan because I started looking for a supervisor before I even graduated. Maybe I did the most, but I went to the board website and looked at the list of supervisors that they had. I knew I wanted to work with a woman, so I crossed out all the men. And then I went down to everybody who, was on the list for ladies. I went to everybody's website to just check the vibe. For me, it's a lot about what it feels like. And I wanted to make sure that I found the right fit as well. So going to the board's website, all of the supervisors are listed there, at least in Texas. I ended up having a supervisor, but not quite feeling like the vibe was right. And so I was still looking around. I actually found Dr. Guy on TikTok. And yep, I found you. So like don't be afraid to like use like I guess non-traditional avenues, social media. Because that's how I found my supervisor and it felt right for me. I went through the process of combing out all of the different supervisors because I wanted to make sure, just like Tan said, that somebody passed the vibe check. And Dr. Guy passed the vibe check.
Definitely passed the vibe check. Okay. She was my first supervisor, and when I met her, it was like a good fit because she was exactly who I was looking for. So I don't remember how I found you, Dr. Guy. It's been how many years? Uh, I think maybe a Google search. But I wanted someone around my area because at the time I lived in Red Oak, and her office was out of DeSoto. So I think that's how I got the connection, I think. But yeah.
We had to do back then, we had to do face to face. So you know how
Yes. Yeah.
virtual didn't exist, you guys. It was 100% face to face
Yeah.
office every week. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah.
Okay. Others, what would you say? What's your supervision? You guys, I have a question. Let me get that question. Tarsha says, does your supervisor have to be at your job site? No, you do not have to have a supervisor at your job site. Now, if you have a board approved supervisor at your job where you don't have to pay for supervision, that's a gold mine. Take it if that's a good supervisor that fits with you. But no, your supervisor can work any place else. They don't have to work where you work at. They just have to be a state approved supervisor.
And I also say that in looking for a job, sometimes the jobs want you to use their supervisor that's on site. So to keep that in mind, if you found somebody else that you want that's not there, that might be like a make or break for a job. I know it was for me.
Okay, so let's piggyback on that. For me, it wasn't. So the second place, so where I work at now, that inpatient hospital, they do have an on-site supervisor, but if you already have one that you have in mind, I get reimbursed back. So like when I pay Dr. Guy, they pay me back. Like, so I get my money back for like paying. So that's a plus with working in like some hospital setting. A lot of people don't know that, but that is a plus, especially if you full time. But you have to be full time, but you can't get your money.
I might have to revisit my negotiations. That's great. That I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's a nice perk, and that's a nice perk. And we're gonna talk about that supervision fee a little bit later, because when I tell my graduate students that they have to pay for their supervisor, they're like, "What are you talking about?" So yeah, we're gonna segue into that after this question too. So other ladies, what advice can you offer to counseling grads about finding a supervisor?
I can tell you exactly what not to do. So, what happens when you get with a supervisor? Maybe the vibe is good up into a certain point, and then what do you do? So, one of the things I messed up on, I found a supervisor. It was a good fit for like that first year of me working, probably like a year and a half. I was good. Around that year and a half mark, I started to recognize that the guidance I was being given started to become frustrating for me because it was going against my style as well as my expectations for myself as a therapist and where I saw myself going in the next 5 years. So, what I would say is finding a supervisor is very similar to finding a good fit for a therapist. We didn't say this earlier, but if you are going to be a therapist, highly suggesting going into therapy yourself so you know what it's like to be on the other side. So seeing your supervisor feels similar to therapy, but kind of for your career, like for what you're doing. One of the things I messed up on is I stayed with the supervisor too long when I started to feel like we weren't a good fit. So then supervision started to feel like a burden. I didn't bring certain things up, like Tan spoke about. Our values seemed to be misaligned, and my future goals were very different from what she saw for me. So I actually used my mentor to find Dr. Guy, talked about some of the things I was struggling with, and she referred her through their experience with each other in the past. And one thing I really appreciated about Dr. Guy is it wasn't just about developing me as a therapist, but I came to the conclusion I don't want to be a therapist forever. So if that's the case, if I don't want to be a full-time therapist forever, how do I get out of this? And who's going to help me grow to that next level? Because, and I think the very specific things is when your supervisor starts suggesting things that aren't in alignment with who you are. They're basically giving you advice based on how they would approach things, which is great if y'all are similar or the same person. But when you're not on that same vibe, when you don't want to be working as a full-time therapist for the rest of your life, what do you do? And I think Dr. Guy, for me, was spot on with helping me develop myself as a therapist, but also just develop myself as a professional and to see ways I can use my knowledge to find other avenues to build income, to build a name, a reputation, and how to do so in a successful and a healthy way as well.
Good point.
Yeah.
Somebody about to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add to that because I think Sarah makes a great point. Is like have an idea of what you're wanting from your therapist, not necessarily just saying, oh, I need somebody to help me with my clients, or just sign off on hours or something. Like, what are you looking for from a therapist? Are you looking for support with clinical cases? Are you looking for help outside of the client caseload? Are you looking for something as far as like guidance with the private practice, or what is it that you're looking for? Because that lets you know what to pay attention to when you're doing your research. Also, asking those questions beforehand, like really getting deep in that first meeting before you go and sign paperwork and get them hooked on. That'll save you a lot of time.
Mhm.
I'm a big advocate for questions. Like, if you can think it, you should ask it. So, the more questions you have, the better chances you have at, just kind of understanding what it is that you're stepping into. So like, just for example, asking your supervisor, let's say if I had a difficult client or a difficult caseload, like what type of advice would you give me, or what type of guidance would you give me to manage something like that? Or if you were to throw out to that supervisor, like say I wanted to build a business, how would you guide me on accomplishing that or building that? And just listening for answers. Are they aligning with what you want and what your career goals are? So just adding off of what Sarah has already said, just ask more questions and get a better understanding about who it is that you're talking to.
I think those are all really great tips. Really thinking about alignment and what that looks like. And so oftentimes I will hear graduate students that will say, well, I don't know what I want to do, right? Like I haven't gotten into the profession yet. I'm still exploring. And that's fine. You don't have to necessarily know what you want to do, but that may mean finding a supervisor that has had some experience, a variety, and some different settings so that they can offer you some tools that you can explore. I think that's a great start, especially for people who are like, I don't necessarily want to be in counseling forever, but I kind of want to explore my options. So look for supervisors that kind of have dabbled in here, dabbled in that. But if that's not what you want, then find someone who is laser focused. So for example, we had a young lady with our group a couple months ago, and she really was interested in EMDR. I'm not trained in EMDR. I think EMDR is phenomenal for anyone who is going to work with clients who has trauma. And so she sought out a position where she could actually get EMDR trained. She was going through the process. And she just really wanted to have that specialized training. So she found a supervisor that was trained in EMDR who also had a practice. Well, that was a better fit than her continuing to work with me because I'm not EMDR trained. And so if you do have a specialty area that you already know that you want to focus in, like EMDR, trauma-informed care, somatic therapy, right? Brianna, that's your area. So if you decided to become a supervisor, you would most likely align with associates that are interested in somatic therapy. And so I think it's really important to, if you do have a clear focus on what you want to do, find a supervisor who's doing that. If you say, I know I want to go into private practice, but the supervisor has never been in private practice, can't answer any questions about private practice, that may not necessarily be the best fit, depending on if you really want to focus on your clinical skills. Sure, take that option, but you might be able to find someone else who can help you with your clinical skills, but also help you build your practice as well. So I do think alignment is going to be essential. And keep this in mind, I think you can only switch supervisors 3 times. Is it 3 times, you guys? 3? So I've had some people that were on their 3rd supervisor by the time they met me. And so if it didn't work out, they were stuck. They couldn't go nowhere because that's it. So you really don't want to get to that 3rd supervisor and realize this still isn't a good fit. You kind of want to figure that thing out early, or at least by the 1st or the 2nd. And this is a person you guys have to spend a lot of time with. And what I mean by a lot, in case you're new in the profession and you're interested in, you have to meet with your supervisor for 4 hours a month. Depending on how that supervisor schedules it, that might mean once every week, twice, one time, whatever the case is. You're going to interact with this person very frequently throughout your supervision time. So find someone that you get along with, find someone that provides you the support that you're looking for, so that you're not looking for someone else or multiple people at the end of the process. Anybody else want to chime in on that one before I move on?
Also, it is an easy switch. If you didn't know that, you just sign a little paperwork and the board does it like that. But I think one thing also, if you have a supervisor that's not timely and constantly changing schedules, being mindful of how that's going to impact your ability to get the support that you need. You do need somebody that does prioritize supervision with you. Flexibility is important, but being mindful of your own boundaries so that you can know when you need to express those boundaries or find somebody else that fits more in alignment with prioritizing you as a supervisee.
Very good point. Now let's get into supervisory pay, right? As an LPC associate, the average counselor in the state of Texas starts off around $55,000. That's in the state of Texas. Depending on where you are, they may vary, but in Texas, the median is around $55,000 for licensed professional counselors. So what does the starting point look like for LPC associates?
Well, when I was applying to 100 jobs, I saw a lot of range in salary. Some of them were like $18 an hour. Some of them were 60. And I think it just depends on where you're looking. And of course, you're probably, what you want to go for is a salary job so you can have benefits. And I knew that that's something that I wanted. So when I, got offered the $12 an hour or the $15 an hour, I just knew that that wasn't going to work for my lifestyle. And so finding a job that allowed me to be on salary, to get benefits, and like other benefits outside of like healthcare, but I knew I needed health insurance. So yeah, it varies.
What else?
It varies. It depends if you go into private practice or whether you go into inpatient, but salary does matter. When you are looking for a job, I ask like a million one questions too. So I do want to know, like, what's your benefits? Can you help pay for supervision? What's your expectations of me? Like, because even if it is salary, like, is this salary where I got to be here like 12 hours a day salary? Or is this salary where I get my job done and get to go home? Because that matters to me. So, because a lot of us who are counselors, we also have lives outside of counseling. We are somebody's parent. Some of us are married. So you want to make sure you balance it out. You're not just a salary job that you just working nonstop. You won't call nonstop because then you don't have a life and you're going to be burnt out before you even get fully licensed. and you don't want to do that.
Very
I
true.
think too, like if you're in private practice like me, of course I have like a full-time job during the day, but it does trickle in. So you're not going, if you're doing it slowly and you're thinking that private practice is going to bring in the money, it's not. Especially because a lot of people are cash pay if they're coming to you in private practice. So you got to think about that. I know I have a friend who is in the program right now. Her husband's like rushing her like, oh my gosh, you can get like 150 per session. And I'm like, coming right out the gate, that's not going to happen. So I think people need to be realistic with themselves. And I know having the right supervisor who's going to tell you that too, because I know for me at first, I was like, I'm not budging on my number. But you have to understand that you have to be flexible in that space. I mean, not just giving away free services, but understand that there is going to be some balance in that as you're growing and as you're while you're an associate working towards becoming fully licensed.
I'm gonna sprinkle some positivity to the associates because I know hearing that is not always good news. So I will say there are jobs out here that do have a high pay rate for associates. There are not many, but they are some where you can make a pretty sustainable income. I've seen me personally in my career, I've seen as low as 35, and I've also seen in private practice, I've seen as low as 35 and as high as 70 for associates. But I've also seen, the salary jobs that do 60,000 a year too as an associate. So there are some good paying jobs, but with that, you have to there's pros and cons to everything. So you just kind of have to like figure out what it is that you want for yourself, what you're willing to accept and what you're not. Cause like they were saying with the salary jobs, you're trading time and energy for that money, as opposed to private practice where you have a little bit more leeway with the time, the scheduling and the income and stuff like that. So I think it just boils down to what it is that you want and what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. But there are some places where y'all can make a decent amount. I know the majority is pretty low though.
Mm. So I will say too, because I work salary, but my job is to do your job, do what you gotta do, and you go home. They don't bother me, and I don't bother them. When I walk out the door, I'm out the door. But and they also have been very flexible. If I needed to like do something in between time, I've done it. I've left, done it, came back. And also the pay was very nice. So I did bonus with that, but that's also like inpatient hospital, which kind of scares a lot of LPC associates. It does scare them. Because it can be kind of scary in an inpatient, but it's not what we see on TV. That's not what it really. It's a lot of work and it's consuming, but it's not like white walls and like head banging all the time. It's not that.
Not all the
Just kind
time.
of not all the time. Just get a little positiveness in there. Not all the
The moon is full, only when the moon is full.
time. Yeah, you might get a little bit.
If you're not in your own private practice, there is a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split. So keep that in mind that you could, the first private practice I was in as an associate, it was $125 per client session, but then I had to do like a 60-40 split for a certain amount of time. Then it would go to a 70-30. So there's that thing as well. I think associate life is more so of a trade-off. What am I trading off? Because my last job, I didn't get as many hours, but the benefits were popping. But this new job, I'm getting all the hours and the benefits aren't as great, and I'm traveling further. So I do think it's just a trade-off. What are you willing to tolerate? What's your goal? If you plan to drag out your associateship for a minute, and take your time on it, then probably going to places where you're a little more comfortable and it's not as rigorous because you do have the time. Me, I'm like, I got to get this done. And that's just my own motivation for it. And so I am taking some hits in areas that I would not like to. However, doing what I need to do, because also as an associate, your negotiating power is somewhat limited. Always negotiate, always ask for more, ask for things like trainings, ask for things like travel comp. They might not give you anything at all, but they might give you a little bit. And I think that negotiation is really important, but you will recognize that they are getting licensed associates at a lower cost with the same amount of work as a fully licensed clinician. So just keeping that in mind, that you are kind of this like pennies on a dollar kind of person for a lot of these organizations. So speak up for yourself, fight for what you need to fight for. And there's other jobs out there that will respect you and give you what you're worth in this moment. I don't think they'll ever fully give you what you're worth, but definitely they are more open to negotiation.
That is absolutely correct. And know that it's temporary, right? You guys can complete your hours as early as 18 months, right? So that's the quickest you can complete them in the state of Texas. And you have 5 years to complete them in the state of Texas. So depending on where you're getting your hours at, you can breeze through them rather quickly. Or if you're at a place to where it's a slow trail, then it may take you a little bit longer. Also, in talking about the trade-off, if you find a position that has supervision on site and you don't have to pay for it, the salary may be a little bit lower because you're not paying for supervision. And that is a nice chunk of change. And so, in case you do not know, when you become an LPC associate, unless you have a supervisor on site that is supervising you, then this becomes an out-of-pocket expense. And so the average supervisor is probably charging what his or her hourly rate is. That can be anywhere from $60 an hour to actually to $200 an hour. So you really do have to kind of do your research. I will never tell you that because you pay more, you get better. If that's what you prefer, absolutely go for that. But no, you kind of just got to do the research, interview as many supervisors as you can until you find the right fit. And hopefully you find someone who fits in your budget. Also ask them about the modalities that they offer. Do they only do individual? Do they offer group and individual? So the ladies that you're looking at, they're in group with me, but I also offer individual. By offering two modalities, you get to lower the rate, but also you allow your associates to benefit from each other in a group setting. So you really have to think about what your needs are, what you're looking for, but start adding that expense to your budget. If you haven't done that already, start running those numbers. Do I want to pay someone $60? Can I pay someone $100? Can I pay someone $200 a week? Because you're going to have to keep that up for the entire 18 months or however long it takes you to complete those hours. So as we prepare to wind down, you guys are doing a lot of different things. And again, Texas is not like most of the states. As LPC associates, you all can have a private practice. And many of you all have a private practice. Many of you all are doing other things. For the people who have seen my lives before, you guys know I talk about creating multiple streams of income. As therapists, I think it's essential that we utilize our services, not just within our counseling offices, but outside those four walls. And so that allows us to have greater reach. So as we prepare to close out, you guys are doing a lot of different things to reach the community and the population that you're working with. So I want people to know what it is that you're doing, how people can reach you, if you're taking new clients, if you have services that you're offering. Go ahead and let everyone know what those things are.
Start. So I have a private practice, Soul Haven Counseling. I am accepting new clients in Texas. I also run a wellness consulting company where I get an opportunity to do life coaching, speaking. I wrote a book. And specifically for this, if you are LPC associate, wanting like more examples of questions that you could ask a supervisor, if you go to hustlemeetsgrace.com, you can download a free guide for supervisory questions when you want to interview them. And I also wrote a book for LPC associates who want to start private practice. And maybe you're not feeling as confident. The book is for you. So you can find all of those things at hustlemeetsgrace.com, and that's where you can find me.
Thank you, Jazz.
So
So You have a checklist that they can go and grab at hustlemeetsgrace.com for any LPC associates that want a list of questions to ask as they're seeking out their supervisor. And you have some digital products in your book.
Yes, I have a book specifically for LPC associates wanting to do private practice, and it's about building confidence because it can be a little scary trying to build a private practice, be a counselor, and run a business. So I think it'll be helpful, and it's just for you. I wrote it for you.
Thank you, Jen.
So I am in the process of, I just started a TikTok page. I was a little hesitant on it, so I'm about to really dive into it now after this. And it is strictly for LPC associates. It's all about information, questions, thoughts. Like, I just want to be a support to people. I think it's always good when you have support or you have people who have knowledge. I don't know everything, but the things I do know, I'm willing to share and just be a blessing to people. So you can follow me on TikTok at Tanika Foster 16. It'd be TANIKAFOSTER 16. That's my TikTok account. I am also in the process of getting my private practice started as well. It is not up and running yet. I'm filling out the finalized paperwork of it. But if you follow me on that TikTok page, then you'll be able to know when it is up and running, and then you'll be able to know when I will be accepting patients or clients, as I call them. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, I'm Brianna. I am owner of Solera Counseling. I am a trauma therapist who specializes in helping people untangle basically the long-term impacts of sexual violence, childhood abuse, any type of relational trauma. So if you are an LPC associate who's looking to heal from any past pains or work through your own past before you get ready to go see clients, and I'm here for you. I have tons of resources. I have a blog and I also have a free downloadable guide on how to start healing. And you can find all of that at soleracounseling.com. And it's spelled SOULERA counseling.com. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right, I am Natasha, and again, I am a full-time school counselor by day and part-time work with the nursing home, and I have about 45, 50 clients there, so that's really my full caseload right there.
That's a lot.
That keeps me busy.
That's definitely a lot.
My name is Ara, and you can find me on TikTok where I share lifestyle content between balancing life after baby and being a therapist in the making. My TikTok handle is Inner Glow Mama, so INNERGLO Mama MAMA.
Thank you, Ara.
I'll go. So you can find me at renewmindscounseling.com. I am accepting new clients. I do see adolescents, individuals, and couples. So yeah, reach out to me at renewmindscounseling.com.
Ladies, thank you so much for giving me your time tonight to come on this live to talk to our future LPC associates. I do hope that this information has been helpful for someone. If they missed it, they can catch the replay. We will be posting it on our social media platforms. In case you do not know, I am Dr. Tanisha. As I stated, I've been practicing in the field soon to be 25 years at the end of this year. I've been supervising for 18 years. I've been helping therapists build practices and fire their bosses for over a decade. If you follow me on TT, then you already know I'm all about creating multiple streams of income. I assist women in walking into their purpose so that you can make money in your sleep, because it's all about making pillow money, but more so it's about creating impact and changing lives. So with that being said, ladies, you all have had a long day. Get some rest. My TT people, thank you so much for joining us. I will be back No, I will not be back on Thursday because it's vacation time for me. So you will not see me on Thursday night, but you all will see me before Tuesday. But make sure you follow these amazing ladies, reach out to them, get connected with them. You guys, they're doing a whole lot, and you're going to see a whole lot more coming from them. So ladies, thank you. Everyone on TT, be blessed. See you guys back in a couple days. Good night. All righty, ladies. Ladies, thank you so much. You all have a great night, and get me all of your websites so that when I post a video, I want to be able to have all your videos, your websites on the video so people can reach out. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Have a
Put
good
in the
night.
chat. You want us to put in the text chat?